The forest stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of towering pines and shadowed undergrowth, their branches whispering secrets to each other as the wind swept through them. Each step I took was a careful negotiation with the earth beneath my feet, roots that threatened to trip me, leaves slick with morning dew, and the uneven ground that seemed determined to slow me down. My chest burned with exhaustion, my lungs gasping as I stumbled forward, driven by a single, desperate thought: I had to survive. The last few days had been a blur of fear, hunger, and loneliness. After leaving my village, after leaving everything I had ever known, I had thought I was ready for anything. But the forest had a way of reminding me how small, how fragile I truly was. Every snapping twig and distant rustle set my heart hammering against my ribs. Every shadow that shifted in the corner of my vision made my stomach twist with instinctual terror. Wolves, wild dogs, hunters, I could not tell friend from foe in this endless green. I paused, pressing a trembling hand to my chest as I tried to steady my ragged breathing. My mind raced, 1,000 scenarios flashing before me. I could see it all: the fall, the snapping branches, the cruel claws, or the ringing of a gunshot. I shivered violently despite the heat of the day, a deep, primal fear curling around my spine like a living thing. And then, in that moment of utter vulnerability, I smelled it. It was a scent that made my head spin, one I could not place yet knew instinctively was dangerous. Rich, wild, commanding, a scent that screamed alpha. My omega instincts flared, sending a shiver through me, part fear, part inexplicable intrigue. I froze, straining to hear over the frantic pounding of my heart. The scent lingered, layered over the scent of the forest and my own panic. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, and somehow familiar. A low growl rumbled through the underbrush before I even saw him. The alpha stepped out from between two trees, his presence so commanding that the world seemed to shrink around him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a grace that betrayed the coiled power beneath his calm exterior. His hair was dark as the shadows under the pines, his eyes a striking shade of amber that burned with intensity and danger. He looked at me, and I felt as though he could see straight through my bones, straight into my very soul. I stumbled backward, panic flooding me. My voice caught in my throat as I tried to call for help, but only a strangled sound escaped. The alpha's gaze held me, unyielding, calculating, yet not immediately hostile. He sniffed the air, his nose twitching, and my pulse quickened. "You're an omega," he stated, his voice low and measured, but there was an edge to it that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Lost. I wanted to argue, to deny it, but the truth was a knife twisting in my chest. Yes, I was an omega. Lost. Alone. Helpless. He stepped closer, and I felt the forest shrink even more, the distance between us charged with a tension that made me both terrified and inexplicably drawn to him. His eyes didn't leave mine, piercing and unrelenting, like they were searching for something only I could hide. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, a warning that seemed to echo through the trees themselves. "It's dangerous for you." I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and tried to steady my voice. I can handle myself," I whispered, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. My hands shook, and my knees threatened to buckle beneath me. He studied me for a long moment, and then, without warning, he moved faster than I could follow, and before I could react, he had placed a hand lightly on my shoulder to steady me. The touch sent a jolt through my body, sharp and unexpected, and my omega instincts flared uncontrollably. My heart thudded painfully, and I could feel a warmth spreading in a place I had long kept cold, my chest, my stomach, my entire being attuned to his presence. "You're not safe alone," he said, his voice dropping to a near growl. "Come with me." I wanted to protest, to run, but I couldn't deny the truth. My body, my instincts, even the faintest part of my mind that still clung to rational thought, screamed that he was right. I was not safe. Not here, not ever. As he guided me through the dense forest, I couldn't help but notice everything about him, the way his movements were effortless, the quiet strength that radiated from every muscle, the scent that wrapped around me like a cloak, overwhelming my senses and leaving me breathless. I had smelled alphas before, in passing, in the safety of others' territories, but never one like him. This was different. He smelled like command, danger, and something I couldn't name but wanted to understand. I tried to focus on the trees, on the path, on anything but him, but it was impossible. Every step we took together felt like an unspoken dialogue between our scents, between our very beings. It was as though the forest itself recognized the connection, the tension that crackled invisibly between us. Finally, we reached a clearing, and he stopped, turning to face me. The sunlight caught in his hair, casting an almost halo-like glow that made him seem less human and more predator, king, guardian of the wild. He measured me with his gaze, and I could feel my knees weakening again, not from fear alone, but from a heady mix of emotions I could not name. "I'll protect you," he said simply. "For now. But understand this, stay too long near me, and the consequences may not be something you survive." I nodded mutely, though my mind screamed in protest and confusion. Protect me? From what? From him? From the world? From myself? He didn't answer, only gave a sharp nod and then moved silently to scan the perimeter. I watched him, heart-hammering, and realized with a shock that despite his warning, despite his cold, commanding presence, I wanted him near. The fear that had dominated my life, the loneliness that had been my constant companion, seemed to melt away in his presence. Hours passed in tense silence. The forest, once a living nightmare, seemed almost peaceful with him nearby. He was a puzzle I couldn't yet solve, a danger I could neither fight nor flee. And as the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, I felt something stirring deep within me. Something wild, something desperate, something that whispered that my life was about to change forever. I didn't know then what that change would be. I only knew that the Alpha who had appeared out of the shadows of the forest, who had smelled me and judged me and claimed some unspoken right over me, had marked the beginning of a journey I could not escape. My scent, my presence, my very soul had called him to me, and whether I liked it or not, he would not let me go. As night fell, the stars pricking the sky with silver light, I realized the truth. The forest was no longer just a place of fear and uncertainty. It had become a crucible, and I had been thrown into its fire. The Alpha watched over me, his amber eyes glinting in the moonlight, and for the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps survival was not enough anymore. Perhaps I was meant for something more. And yet, beneath the fragile spark of hope, the primal warning of my Omega instincts pulsed stronger than ever. He was dangerous, untouchable, and everything I was told to fear. And I could not resist him. The night stretched on, filled with the symphony of the wild, the rustling leaves, the distant howl of a lone wolf, the whisper of wind through the branches, and I knew, with a certainty that frightened me, that nothing in my life would ever be the same again. The forest at dawn was different from the one I had stumbled through the day before. The mist curled around the trees like a living thing, weaving between trunks and branches, shrouding the ground in a soft, ghostly veil. Every sound was amplified in the stillness, the snap of a twig underfoot, the distant call of a bird, the whisper of the wind against leaves. It was a world suspended between night and day, between fear and something else I couldn't yet name. I woke to the scent of him first. Even in sleep, even in the haze of exhaustion, his presence had invaded the edges of my mind. It wasn't just a smell, it was a force, a pulse that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. Amber, sharp, commanding, dangerous, and yet familiar. My chest tightened, and I realized with a mixture of fear and fascination that I had never smelled anything like it before, never been aware of a presence so potent that it could make the world itself shrink around him. The Alpha. He hadn't stirred, not fully. I could see the rise and fall of his chest in the early light, the faint glimmer of his hair catching the morning sun. Even in sleep, he radiated power, an aura that pressed against the edges of my mind, challenging me, teasing me, drawing me in. Part of me wanted to reach for him, to feel the warmth of his strength, the grounding force that promised safety, yet another part of me screamed to run, to flee, to never come closer. I shifted slightly, trying to make myself small, to respect the invisible boundary between us. But he stirred, eyes snapping open with a speed that left me breathless, and in that instant, our gazes locked. Amber eyes met my frightened blue ones, and the forest seemed to vanish, leaving only the two of us suspended in a moment that stretched and stretched until time itself felt irrelevant. "You're awake," he said, his voice low, smooth, and yet threaded with something dangerous, something that warned me not to underestimate him. There was no anger in it, no malice, but the raw power beneath the calm made every hair on my body stand on end. I couldn't sleep, I admitted, my voice barely more than a whisper, fragile and trembling. My fingers clenched into the fabric of my tunic, nails biting into the cloth as I struggled to steady my racing heart. He observed me silently, unblinking, like a predator weighing its options. And then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward, his gaze softening just enough to make me think I might be safe, just enough to make me almost believe I could trust him. Almost. You smelled different yesterday, he murmured, as though thinking aloud. Your scent. He paused, frowning slightly, as if struggling to reconcile the sensations his body had reacted to with the control his mind demanded. It's unique. My stomach fluttered, nerves and something more primal twisting together. Unique? I asked, barely daring to speak. I could feel my cheeks heating. What did he mean? Did he know what he was doing to me without even trying? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and moved to the edge of the clearing, scanning the forest with a precision that made my pulse spike. Every muscle in his body was coiled energy, ready to strike, to defend, to dominate. He was the alpha in every sense, unyielding, unapproachable, magnetic in a way that terrified me even as it drew me closer. Finally, he turned back to me, and the weight of his gaze made my knees weak. Your scent, he said again, more to himself than to me, it's stirring things in me I thought I had buried long ago. The words made my breath catch. Stirring things? What did that mean? My omega instincts flared, sudden, insistent, demanding attention. My body ached in places I didn't understand, craving something I wasn't sure I deserved. He was an alpha, and yet, his control, his restraint, only made the pull stronger, like the moon tugging at the tides. I wanted to ask him, to understand, to know what he felt. But the fear was louder than curiosity. Alphas were dangerous. Their emotions, even subtle ones, could consume an omega. And yet, I couldn't look away. Why are you looking at me like that? I asked finally, my voice trembling. What is it that you feel? He tilted his head slightly, as though examining me, as though deciding whether I was a threat or a curiosity. And then he spoke, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the earth itself. I don't feel this way about anyone, he admitted. Never have, never will, at least, that's what I've told myself. Until you. The words hit me like a lightning strike. My mind went blank, and yet every nerve in my body screamed in recognition. Something primal, something undeniable, surged through me. He felt it too. He couldn't deny it, couldn't ignore it, no matter how much he might want to. You smell like life, he said finally, almost in a whisper, and I understood instantly. It wasn't just the alpha scent, the dominance, the danger. It was more. It was the pull of instincts, of chemistry, of something older than words, older than logic. It was raw, unfiltered, and it called to him just as strongly as he called to me. I swallowed, fighting to maintain some semblance of composure, but my legs betrayed me, weak and trembling. I don't understand, I admitted. Why me? He sighed, a sound that was part frustration, part awe, and he stepped closer, the air between us charged with tension that could ignite at any moment. Because you're not like the others, he said. Your scent, your presence, it's impossible to ignore. And I don't want to. The forest seemed to hum around us, leaves rustling softly, birds calling in distant branches, yet the world had narrowed to him and me, to the pulse of life and instinct and something we both feared and desired. My omega instincts screamed for him, for his protection, for his dominance and yet, for his gentleness. For the paradox that he was, dangerous and yet safe, terrifying and yet comforting. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. We spoke little, communicating instead through glances, through the unspoken language of scent, of instinct, of something primal that bound us tog. Ether before we even knew each other's names. I watched him, noting the tension in his muscles, the way his eyes never left me, the subtle ways he tested boundaries, measured reactions, explored without touching. And in that silence, in the early morning mist, I realized something profound. I was no longer just an omega in the wild. I was an omega in his world, a world that was dangerous and intoxicating, terrifying and beautiful. And he was the alpha who would define it, whether I wanted him to or not. The alpha's scent lingered in the air long after he moved away, a reminder of the power he wielded effortlessly. I shivered, both with fear and longing, and I knew that my life had shifted irreversibly. Survival was no longer enough. Something deeper, something irrevocable, had taken root between us. I did not yet understand the depth of it, nor the danger, nor the way my very being would entwine with his. But I knew one thing with certainty. The alpha who hated love had noticed me, had smelled me, and in doing so, had set a chain of events into motion from which neither of us could escape. The forest held its breath with me, the mist curling like secrets, and I realized that everything I thought I knew about danger, about desire, about love, it was about to change forever. The sun had barely begun its climb over the horizon when I realized just how utterly dependent I had become on his presence. The forest, once terrifying and relentless, now felt like a living entity I could navigate, but only with him nearby. Each sound, each rustle, each shadow still carried the weight of danger, yet the alpha's presence was a shield, a constant reminder that I was not entirely alone, not entirely vulnerable. He had taken it upon himself to guide me, though he never asked for my permission. At first, I had resisted, pushing against him with everything I had, words, gestures, even my omega instincts screaming for autonomy. But the forest was merciless, and even I, with all my stubbornness, could not fight against the truth. I was lost, exhausted, and utterly unprepared for the wild. "Move slower," he said once, his voice a low rumble that made my heart skip a beat. I flinched instinctively, but the tone wasn't anger, it was caution, measured and precise, like every other part of him. His amber eyes studied me as though weighing my very survival, calculating my weaknesses with a predator's precision. Yet beneath the intensity, I sensed something else, a flicker of concern, a rare softness he seemed to hide from the world but could not hide from me. I nodded mutely, trying to obey, though my body was stiff and tired. My muscles ached from the day before, my feet were blistered and raw, and yet I followed. His scent was everywhere, a constant pull, both grounding and matty. Ning. It wrapped around me like a cloak, searing into my mind and body in ways I did not fully understand. I was aware of every movement he made, every subtle shift of his weight, every flex of muscle beneath the taut lines of his frame. My omega instincts hummed, alert and insistent, drawing me closer even when reason screamed for caution. The trail through the forest was treacherous. Fallen logs lay across the path, roots twisted beneath the soil like hidden traps, and the underbrush clawed at my legs with every step. Yet he moved effortlessly, stepping over obstacles with fluid grace, pausing only to glance back and ensure I was still following. I felt a strange mix of awe and fear. He was a creature perfectly attuned to the wild, and I, fragile and human, was utterly dependent on him. "I can manage," I insisted quietly at one point, trying to assert myself. "I don't need you to." He cut me off with a sharp look, one eyebrow raised in that way that made me feel both chastised and exposed. "You can't manage," he said simply, the words carrying the weight of fact, not argument. "Not here, not alone, not for long, and I will not watch you die because you refuse my help." I opened my mouth to respond, but the forest seemed to echo the truth of his words. I could feel the undercurrent of danger beneath every step, the eyes of predators unseen, the snap of branches that might conceal threats. I swallowed, realizing that my pride, my stubbornness, meant little in this place. And yet, even as I admitted my reliance on him, a small, reluctant part of me bristled against the truth. I was an omega, yes, but I had always been independent, always been self-reliant. Accepting his protection was new, disorienting, and terrifying in ways I could not articulate. We stopped briefly near a stream, the water bubbling over smooth stones, sunlight scattering in fleeting diamonds across the surface. I knelt to drink, the cool liquid soothing my parched throat and calming the jittery tremors that had plagued me since dawn. He watched silently, standing at the edge of the clearing, alert to every sound, every movement. His presence was almost overwhelming, an invisible pressure that demanded attention, demanded respect, and yet promised safety. I dared a glance up at him, and our eyes met. There was an intensity there that made my pulse spike, a mixture of hunger and restraint, dominance and caution. I wanted to speak, to ask him what he felt, to unravel the tension that crackled between us like an electric storm. But I couldn't find the words. Words were inadequate when faced with the raw, primal force of an alpha's presence, when my body responded to him in ways I barely understood myself. "You're tense," he observed quietly, a hint of curiosity threading his tone. "Rella. X." I shook my head, embarrassed. "I can't," I admitted. Not around you. It's overwhelming." He stepped closer, and I felt the forest shrink again, the world narrowing to the space between us. His gaze held mine, unyielding, commanding, and yet in it, there was a softness I had not expected. A flicker of care, of attention, of something almost tender. "Your scent," he murmured, almost to himself, "it does this to me. I can't ignore it." My omega instincts flared violently, making my knees weak and my chest ache in ways that scared me. It wasn't just attraction, it was the pull of survival, of instinct, of something ancient and unbreakable that demanded recognition. And yet, the awareness of his restraint, the control he exercised despite the storm within him, made my heart pound in awe and terror. We moved on, the forest gradually thickening, shadows stretching longer as the sun rose higher. He led, I followed, a silent agreement binding us together. Every now and then, he would glance back, scanning the trees, sniffing the air, his senses attuned to every threat. I realized then that his vigilance was not merely for himself, it was for me. And the realization both terrified and comforted me in equal measure. Hours passed in this tense proximity. I learned to anticipate his movements, to mirror his careful steps, to read the subtle cues in his stance and his gaze. The dependency between us grew, unspoken yet undeniable. I hated the necessity of it, the way my survival was entwined with his presence, and yet I could not deny the relief, the flicker of security that only he could provide. As we finally reached a small clearing, a place where the trees parted to reveal a patch of sun-warmed earth, he finally stopped. The shift in tension was palpable, a subtle release that made my shoulders relax despite myself. "Rest," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You need it." I nodded mutely, sinking to the ground with a sigh of relief. My body was aching, my muscles screaming in protest, but the exhaustion was nothing compared to the overwhelming pull of his presence. Even sitting, even with some distance between us, I could feel the alpha's influence pressing in, wrapping around me like an invisible tether. He crouched nearby, still alert, still vigilant, and yet he did not intrude. The distance was respectful, and yet every movement, every glance, carried an unspoken claim. He was mine in ways neither of us had acknowledged aloud, a connection written in scent, in instinct, in survival itself. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the sun on my skin, the soft rustling of the forest, and the lingering scent of the alpha wash over me. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself a single, fragile thought, Perhaps being with him, being near him, was not entirely terrifying. Perhaps it was necessary. And yet, even as I allowed myself that fleeting comfort, the omega instincts inside me warned of danger. Alphas were powerful, unpredictable, and consuming. The closeness I felt now, the tether that bound us in survival and instinct, was only the beginning. The forest, the alpha, and my own senses whispered a truth I could not deny. The proximity I had been forced into was more than survival. It was the beginning of a bond that neither of us could ignore, a bond that would shape every choice, every heartbeat, every pulse of our intertwined fates. The sun climbed higher, and the forest seemed to lean in closer, holding its breath as if aware of the tension, aware of the fragile line we were walking. I dared to glance at him again, and in that moment, I realized with a mix of fear and longing that my life, my very existence, had become inseparable from the alpha who had smelled me, claimed me in ways I could not yet understand, and forced me into a proximity that was as terrifying as it was inevitable. The forest around us whispered secrets of survival and instinct, and I understood that my journey was only beginning. The alpha, the wild, and the pull of something ancient and irresistible had intertwined our paths, and no matter how much I wanted to resist, I could not escape the truth. We were bound together now, and every step we took from here would define the rest of our lives. The forest was quieter now, the sun climbing higher and scattering the mist in long, golden rays. I had slept fitfully, my dreams haunted by shadows and whispers that felt both distant and painfully familiar. Even waking, my mind was restless, replaying the events of the past days like a cruel film I could not pause. He was there, as always, a presence that filled the space around me without asking permission. I could sense him before I saw him, the subtle shift in air, the faint rustle of leaves as he moved. Even in the stillness of the morning, the Alpha was an inescapable force, a tether that pulled at my instincts and my heart in ways I could neither fully understand nor resist. We had walked together in silence for hours, the forest around us stretching into dappled light and shadow. He led the way, scanning every branch and stone, his senses attuned to dangers I could not even imagine. Every so often, he would glance back, eyes briefly meeting mine, and in that moment, I felt both seen and evaluated, measured in a way that was unnerving and exhilarating all at once. It was then that I realized something I hadn't admitted even to myself. I was curious about him. About who he was, about what had shaped him into the Alpha before me. "You don't speak much," I said quietly, my voice almost swallowed by the dense forest around us. The words felt awkward, fragile, yet I could not stop them from spilling out. "I don't even know your name." His amber eyes flicked toward me, and I caught the faintest shift in his expression, something almost human, almost vulnerable, before it hardened again into the calm, commanding presence I had come to both fear and crave. "I am what you call an Alpha," he replied, voice low, measured, refusing to give more than the bare minimum. "Names are irrelevant here. Survival matters more." I frowned, trying to hide the sting of disappointment. I wanted more, I wanted connection, and yet the Alpha, the man before me, seemed intent on keeping everything locked away. His scent, his power, his very presence, it was overwhelming, but it was incomplete without the truth of who he was. As we continued, a subtle tension settled between us, not born of anger, but of unspoken questions. He was a fortress, a barrier, and yet there was a flicker of something I sensed beneath the control, a memory, a scar, a vulnerability he refused to share. I wanted to know it. I needed to. "Why do you keep everyone at a distance?" I asked suddenly, almost daring him to answer. My voice trembled slightly, betraying both fear and hope. "Why do you push everyone away?" He stopped abruptly, turning to face me. The sudden motion made my heart race, the forest shrinking around us as his gaze bore into mine. For a long moment, he said nothing, and I felt exposed, vulnerable, as though he could see every secret I had tried to bury, every fear I had tried to hide. "I have my reasons," he said finally, his voice tight, controlled. "Love, trust, they are dangerous. I have learned that the hard way. I do not allow either." The words sent a shiver down my spine. There was a weight behind them, a history I could sense but not yet touch. I wanted to press further, to pry, to understand, but I hesitated. His pain was palpable, radiating from him in waves that made my omega instincts ache with both empathy and desire. "Something happened to you," I murmured softly, taking a cautious step closer. "I can feel it. You don't have to speak if you don't want, but I can tell there's a reason you hate everything that has to do with love." His gaze flickered, just for a moment, and I thought I saw something break in him, a crack in the armor he had built so meticulously. He looked away, jaw tight, hands clenching at his sides, and I realized he had not expected to be seen in this way. Not by anyone. "Many years ago," he began slowly, voice low, "I loved someone, deeply. I trusted them completely, and they betrayed me. Destroyed everything I held dear. My pack, my life, my very sense of worth. After that, I promised myself I would never allow anyone to hurt me like that again. Never. Love is a weakness, Omega. I do not indulge in weakness." The confession hung between us, heavy, almost suffocating. My heart clenched, and I felt an involuntary surge of protectiveness, mixed with something I couldn't name, a fascination, an aching curiosity, a desire to reach through his pain and show him that not all love was betrayal. I understand pain," I whispered, my voice small, almost lost in the forest. "I've had my share, but not all connections end in betrayal. Some can be different." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the Alpha's carefully maintained control falter. There was hesitation, a flicker of doubt, and something softer, more human beneath the surface. I felt the shift deep within me, the subtle change in the air, the unspoken acknowledgement that I was not just another Omega, not just another soul to pass through his life and vanish. You are, unlike the others, he admitted finally. Your scent, your presence, it is different. And yet, I do not know what to do with that. I do not know if I can handle it. I took another step closer, emboldened by the rare vulnerability he had shown. Then let me show you, I said softly. Let me prove that it doesn't have to be a weakness. That love can be strength, not destruction. For a long moment, he said nothing. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the sunlight catching in the mist, the rustle of leaves a delicate symphony around us. I could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, and my own pulsed in tandem, the silent rhythm of connection that transcended words. Finally, he spoke, voice low, almost a growl. You are bold, Omega. Foolishly bold. And yet, I cannot ignore you. The words made my chest tighten, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and something undeniably thrilling. I realized that his walls were not invincible, they could be breached, slowly, cautiously, but with intent and care. And perhaps, just perhaps, I was the one who could do it. As we moved forward through the forest, I noticed the subtle changes in him. His movements remained precise, controlled, dominant, but there was a softness now, a watchfulness not just for survival, but for me. He was beginning to reveal himself, layer by layer, and I felt the immense weight of responsibility settle in my chest. His past was heavy, scarred, and painful, yet he was offering me a glimpse into it, a rare trust I knew could be withdrawn at any moment. We came upon a small clearing near a waterfall, the mist rising like silver smoke, and I felt a strange sense of serenity. He paused, scanning the area as usual, then allowed himself to sit, the first sign of relaxation I had seen from him in days. You need to rest, he said simply, his amber eyes softening as they met mine. You cannot survive if you are exhausted, no matter how strong you think you are. I nodded, sinking to the earth, letting the damp grass and cool mist calm my frayed nerves. For the first time, I allowed myself to simply breathe, to feel the weight of his presence without fear. He sat a short distance away, vigilant, yet present in a way that spoke of protection, of guardianship, of something deeper than mere survival. I watched him in silence, realizing that I was beginning to understand him in ways I hadn't anticipated. The alpha who hated love was not a simple creature, he was complex, scarred, powerful, and yet vulnerable beneath the surface. And I, the Omega who had stumbled into his world, was becoming entangled in a web of connection, trust, and instinct I could not yet name, but could already feel shaping my very being. The sun climbed higher, the mist dissipating into shafts of warm light, and I understood something profound. Secrets, pain, and past betrayals did not have to define the present. Perhaps, together, we could navigate the treacherous path ahead, not just for survival, but for something far more profound. Trust, understanding, and the slow, undeniable pull of a bond neither of us could resist. And as I watched him, the alpha who had smelled me, marked me, and drawn me into his world, I realized that my life was no longer mine alone. Our fates were entwined now, inseparable, and the secrets he had revealed were only the beginning of a journey neither of us could escape. The forest had begun to shift as we ventured deeper into its heart. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy in fractured beams, painting the ground with patches of gold and shadow. Every step we took felt like an unspoken negotiation between us, he leading, vigilant and commanding, and I following, alert, aware of both the danger and the strange magnetism he exuded. Even after days together, I could feel the tension in him, the taut line of his muscles, the precision in his movements, the way his eyes scanned every shadow as though it might conceal a threat to him or to me. And yet, beneath that unyielding exterior, there were cracks. Fleeting, subtle, almost imperceptible moments when his control faltered, and I caught a glimpse of the alpha beneath the armor, a being capable of emotions he had long denied himself. We stopped beside a gnarled oak, roots twisting like serpents through the earth. The alpha crouched, his amber eyes sweeping the clearing with effortless grace. I watched him silently, the scent of him stronger here in the stillness, and I felt my Omega instincts flare again, insistent and demanding. My chest tightened, my mind whirring with questions I did not dare speak aloud. You're quiet, he said suddenly, voice low, measured, and commanding. The sound vibrated through the air, through me, in a way that made my heart flutter uncontrollably. Do you always think too much? I shook my head quickly, though I could feel my pulse betraying me. I just observe, I murmured, trying to understand everything. He studied me, amber eyes narrowing slightly, as though weighing the truth in my words. Observation is different from understanding, he said. You think you understand, but you do not. Not yet. I swallowed, trying to hide the sting of his words. But even as I bristled, a small part of me recognized the truth in them. I did not understand him. I did not understand the layers of pain, the walls, the control he had built around himself, the instincts he fought to suppress. And yet, instinctively, I knew that I wanted to. I wanted to see beyond the wall, to touch the part of him that even he had hidden from the world. He turned away, scanning the perimeter, and I caught a fleeting shadow of something, vulnerability, perhaps, or frustration, before it was replaced with the unyielding alpha presence I had come to recognize. I realized then that his wall was not just a defense. It was a fortress built from pain, betrayal, and a lifetime of lessons that had taught him that trust was dangerous, that love was weakness, and that vulnerability could be fatal. I can help you, I said softly, stepping closer, though still keeping a careful distance. I don't mean to intrude. But I can help. You don't have to bear it alone. He froze, every muscle tensing as though I had dared to cross some invisible boundary. His amber eyes fixed on me, intense and unblinking, and for a long moment, I felt exposed under that gaze. The forest seemed to hold its breath with me, the rustle of leaves and distant calls fading into silence. You do not understand, he said finally, his voice low, strained with something he was clearly struggling to contain. I cannot let anyone close enough to see the real me. If they do, they will be destroyed. I have destroyed those who tried before. The words hit me like a physical blow, and yet they carried an unspoken truth beneath the warning. He did not want to hurt me. His restraint, the careful control in his tone, the way he positioned himself between me and danger, it all spoke of a desire to protect, to shield, even as he feared the consequences of closeness. I swallowed hard, my omega instincts flaring, heart pounding. I'm not like them, I whispered. I won't be destroyed. I can handle it. You don't have to bear this alone. Let me share it with you. For the first time, his expression wavered. There was hesitation, uncertainty, and something I could only describe as awe. It was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared, but it was enough to make my pulse spike, to make the tension between us thrum like a living thing. Perhaps you do not understand what you are offering, he said quietly, more to himself than to me. Perhaps it is more than either of us can bear. I took another step closer, emboldened by the rare vulnerability he had shown. I can bear it, I insisted softly. With you. Together. That is what matters. The alpha looked away, jaw tightening, hands clenching at his sides, as if the struggle within him was visible in the set of his shoulders, the flex of his fingers. I could feel the storm beneath the calm surface, the tension between instinct and control, between desire and fear, between the past and what could be. We remained in silence for hours, moving slowly through the forest, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I watched him, noting the subtle shifts in his expression, the way he held himself in constant vigilance, the occasional flicker of doubt or pain that he could not hide completely. I realized then that his wall was both a defense and a prison, a fortress that kept others out but also trapped him inside, alone with his memories and fears. I wanted to reach out, to break through the wall, but I knew it would take patience, trust, and understanding. The alpha did not yield easily, he did not allow weakness, and yet, I could sense that the smallest crack could be enough for connection to bloom. My instincts screamed that I was meant to be that crack, to show him that trust and love were not fatal, that vulnerability could coexist with strength. As the sun began its descent, painting the forest in long shadows and golden light, we came upon a small clearing by a stream. He paused, scanning the area as always, before finally allowing himself to sit, the first sign of relaxation I had seen from him since we met. I knelt nearby, feeling the pull of his presence, the scent that wrapped around me like a living thing. You rest, he commanded softly, amber eyes meeting mine with a mixture of authority and something else, something unspoken. You will need your strength. The path ahead will not be easy. I nodded, sinking into the grass, letting the warmth of the fading sun and the gentle rustle of leaves calm my nerves. For the first time, I allowed myself to simply breathe, to feel his presence without fear, to acknowledge the strange, undeniable bond forming between us. The Alpha's wall was formidable, built from years of pain and betrayal, yet I could sense the beginnings of cracks. I did not yet know what lay beyond them, fear, love, rage, or something else entirely, but I knew one thing with certainty. I would not turn away. I would not flee. As twilight descended, casting the forest in hues of violet and silver, I realized that survival was no longer the only goal. Understanding him, connecting with him, breaking through the walls he had built, these were challenges I was willing to face, even if it meant confronting danger, fear, and the raw, untamed instincts that pulsed between us. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath, the world narrowing to the space between the Alpha and the Omega, bound together by fate, by instinct, and by a connection that neither of us could yet fully comprehend. And I knew, deep within me, that this was only the beginning. The Alpha's wall was formidable, but no wall was insurmountable. And I, the Omega who had stumbled into his world, was determined to see what lay beyond it, even if it meant risking everything. The forest had settled into a soft, almost sacred quiet as the afternoon sun poured through the canopy. Shadows stretched long, and the air held a warmth that was almost hypnotic. Every sound, the distant rush of a hidden brook, the subtle chirping of birds, the soft rustle of leaves, felt amplified, as though the forest itself had become attuned to the rhythm between us. He moved ahead, careful and measured, yet I noticed the subtle ease in his steps that hadn't been there before. The Alpha, whose presence had once been an overwhelming force I had felt in every nerve, every instinct, now seemed less rigid. There was a small softness in the set of his shoulders, a lightness in the precision of his movements that told me, without words, that he had begun to accept my presence in a way he hadn't before. I followed, careful to maintain distance, yet drawn irresistibly toward him. Every step we took together felt like a dance of instincts, a silent communication written in the cadence of our movements, the tension in the air, the mingling of our scents. My Omega instincts had long since recognized him as dominant, commanding, dangerous, and yet, paradoxically, comforting. I had never felt anything like this before, fear and security, anxiety and longing, all wrapped into one magnetic force that pulled me closer with every heartbeat. We paused by a narrow stream that cut through the forest, water glittering in patches of sunlight. He crouched to examine the bank, scanning the surroundings as usual, and I sat a few feet away, letting the gentle murmur of the water calm my frayed nerves. I had come to rely on these moments, the silence between us, as much as I had come to rely on his presence for protection. The Alpha's vigilance was no longer oppressive, it was a tether I had learned to lean on, a signal that, no matter the dangers lurking in the forest, I was not entirely alone. "You are persistent," he said suddenly, amber eyes flicking toward me. There was no reprimand in his tone, only observation, as though he was trying to measure something beyond what was visible. "You do not shy from me, despite everything." I swallowed, my pulse quickening. "Because I want to understand you," I admitted quietly, the words trembling on my lips. "I want to know who you are, not just the Alpha everyone fears." He remained silent, his gaze piercing yet inscrutable, and for a moment, I feared I had overstepped, that my vulnerability would be met with dismissal, or worse, anger. But instead, he took a slow, deliberate breath, and I sensed the weight of his restraint, the effort it took to maintain control over the instincts he had denied for so long. "You should not," he said finally, his voice low, almost a growl. "To understand me, is dangerous." And yet, the way he said it, hesitant, burdened, almost reluctant, told me the truth. He did not want to push me away. He was testing boundaries, measuring my courage, my strength, my patience. And I realized that I had crossed the invisible threshold. He was beginning to let me in, slowly, cautiously, and I would have to prove that I belonged. I met his gaze, holding it steadily, letting the warmth of my Omega presence flow into the space between us. "I am not afraid," I whispered. "Not of you, not of what I feel, not of what you might do. I trust you." The words hung in the air, fragile and potent, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in him, surprise, perhaps, or a faint glimmer of vulnerability. His jaw tightened, and he looked away, scanning the forest as though he needed to ground himself in vigilance before allowing the pull of emotion to reach him fully. Hours passed as we navigated the dense forest together, each of us lost in our own thoughts yet acutely aware of the other's presence. He remained vigilant, every movement precise, every glance measured, yet there were moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible, where he lingered closer than necessary, where the tension between us hummed in the air like a living thing. I noticed the subtle shifts in his posture, the way his eyes softened when they flicked toward me, the occasional deep exhale that seemed more about relief than fatigue. We came upon a small clearing where the sunlight pooled like molten gold. He stopped, scanning the perimeter one last time before finally allowing himself to sit. I mirrored him, kneeling a few feet away, letting the warmth of the sun and the subtle murmur of the forest wash over me. I dared a glance at him, and this time, I saw it, the alpha's wall cracking further. A softness in his amber eyes, a subtle relaxation in his stance, a willingness to share space without the constant vigilance that had defined him for so long. "You are, unlike anyone I have ever known," he admitted quietly, voice low, almost reverent. "Your scent, your presence, it is relentless. It does not let me forget. It does not allow me to retreat." I felt my chest tighten at his words. "Then do not retreat," I whispered. "Let me stay. Let me help. Let me be here." His gaze lingered on me, intense and unreadable, and I realized then that this moment, this fragile connection, was pivotal. He could push me away, retreat into the walls he had built, and deny himself the bond that even now, neither of us fully understood. Or he could allow it, let himself feel, let the pull of instinct and desire and something far older than logic guide him. The alpha took a slow step closer, his presence folding over me like a protective shadow. I felt the heat of his body, the power of his scent, the silent declaration that he would not allow danger to touch me. Not just the threat of the forest, but the vulnerability that came from being seen, understood, and desired. "You smell different near me," he murmured, almost to himself. "Not just because you are Omega. Not just because I cannot resist you, but because you belong here. With me. And that terrifies me." My pulse quickened, Omega instincts flaring with a mixture of longing and understanding. I wanted to reach out, to close the gap, to prove that I could stand beside him, not beneath him, not as prey, but as a partner, as someone who understood the weight he carried and was willing to share it. "I am here," I said softly, letting my presence speak for me. "I am not afraid. I will not leave. I will stay. Even if it terrifies you." He remained silent for a long moment, amber eyes locked on mine, the tension in the air palpable. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he relaxed. Just a fraction. The muscles in his shoulders softened, the rigid line of his jaw eased, and for the first time, I felt the full force of his acceptance, not just of me, but of the bond forming between us. The forest seemed to exhale around us, the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the whisper of the wind through the trees, all aligning with the subtle shift in our connection. The alpha who had hated love, who had built walls from betrayal and fear, was beginning to let them crumble. And I, the omega who had stumbled into his life, felt the pull of a bond that was no longer just instinctual survival, but something deeper, something emotional, something irrevocable. As twilight approached, painting the forest in shades of violet and silver, I realized that our journey was far from over. The bond between us was growing, unspoken yet undeniable, tethered by scent, instinct, and the slow emergence of trust. He had allowed me into his world, into the space he had carefully guarded, and though the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, both internal and external, we were no longer separate. We were tethered now, bound by something older than words, older than logic, older than fear. And as I watched him, the alpha whose scent had first drawn me like a tide I could not resist, I knew with certainty that our connection would define everything to come, the dangers we faced, the choices we made, and the inevitable reckoning with the walls he had built around his heart. And for the first time, I felt hope, not just for survival, but for something far greater, a bond that could withstand the weight of the past, the demands of the present, and the promise of a future neither of us could yet fully imagine. The forest had changed as the sun began to sink, shadows stretching long and dark across the uneven ground. The light filtered through the thick canopy in fragmented streams, giving the trees an ethereal glow, but the beauty of the forest was deceptive. Danger lurked in every shadow, and instinct, honed by necessity and survival, told me that the serenity was fragile. The alpha led with a vigilance that left no space for error. Every step was calculated, every movement precise, yet there was a subtle tension in his posture that I hadn't noticed before. He was alert, not just to external threats, but to something internal, a restlessness, a war between instinct and emotion that had grown since our bond had begun to deepen. I walked behind him, cautious, my senses heightened, aware of the pull his presence had on me. His scent enveloped me, warm and intoxicating, grounding me even as my omega instincts whispered caution. I had learned to trust him with my life in the forest, yet a part of me feared the intensity of what I felt when I was near him. This was no ordinary connection. It was raw, consuming, magnetic, and it was only growing stronger. We reached a narrow pass where the trees clustered close together, and the sunlight barely touched the forest floor. The underbrush was thick, roots twisting like hidden snares beneath our feet. He paused, amber eyes scanning the shadows with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. I felt it before I saw it, the subtle shift in the air, the almost imperceptible rustle of movement that screamed of danger. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice low, unwavering. "Do not stray. One wrong step could mean death here." I nodded, heart pounding. My instincts screamed that something was approaching, and I felt the alpha's tension radiating through the space between us. He moved forward, silent and fluid, his senses catching the slightest disturbance in the environment. I followed cautiously, aware that my survival depended not just on my own instincts, but on his unwavering vigilance. The attack came suddenly. A figure burst from the shadows, teeth bared, eyes glowing with feral intent. A predator of the forest, larger than any I had seen, lunged toward me with speed and ferric ity that left no time for reaction. Before I could scream, the alpha was there. His body moved with a speed that blurred the line between human and beast, intercepting the attacker with a strength and precision that was terrifying and awe-inspiring. The predator collided with him, and for a moment, they seemed locked in a struggle of raw power. I froze, helpless, yet instinctively drawn to the danger, my chest tightening as my omega instincts surged. He growled low, a sound that resonated through the clearing, and I felt the intensity of his presence, the command he exerted not just over me, but over the world around him. The fight was brief but brutal. With a final, decisive movement, he sent the predator sprawling to the ground, incapacitated but alive. He turned toward me, amber eyes blazing, chest heaving with controlled fury and adrenaline. "You are safe," he said, voice rough, low, yet carrying a reassurance I had not expected. "Do not move from my side." I nodded mutely, my body trembling from the surge of fear and relief. I had never felt so small, so exposed, and yet so undeniably connected to another being. His presence was more than protection. It was a tether, a bond that had been forged not by choice but by circumstance, instinct, and the undeniable pull of our intertwined fates. As the adrenaline faded, I realized that the incident had shifted something between us. The alpha, who had kept his emotions tightly controlled, who had built walls from betrayal and fear, now allowed himself to be seen, not just as a protector, but as someone capable of care, of vulnerability, of an instinctive attachment that was no longer entirely hidden. We moved on, slower now, every step measured, the tension between us more complex than ever. He remained vigilant, yet there were moments when his gaze lingered on me, amber eyes softening in ways that betrayed the strength of his restraint. I felt it in the pull of his scent, in the heat of his presence, in the unspoken acknowledgement that the bond between us was deepening in ways neither of us fully understood. Hours passed in this careful dance of survival and closeness. I learned to anticipate his movements, to read the subtle cues in his posture, the shifts in his gaze, the changes in his scent. Each moment of shared silence, each glance, each instinctual recognition of danger, drew us closer, binding us in ways that were beyond logic, beyond conscious choice. By the time we reached a small clearing near a cascading waterfall, the sky had begun to darken, stars emerging through gaps in the canopy. The forest seemed to exhale, holding its breath in the stillness of the night, as if aware of the fragile, growing bond between us. He finally allowed himself to sit, the first true relaxation I had seen from high. In days. I knelt nearby, careful not to invade the space he had carved, yet drawn irresistibly toward him. His amber eyes met mine, intense, unblinking, and I felt the full force of the connection that had been building, raw, unfiltered, primal. "You survived," he said, voice low, almost a growl, yet threaded with something else, pride, perhaps, or relief. "You have strength, Omega. More than I expected." I met his gaze, heart-pounding. "I had to," I whispered. "I am stronger because you are here. Because of us." For the first time, I saw his wall falter completely. The alpha who had hated love, who had built barriers from pain and fear, now allowed himself to acknowledge the bond we shared, not just instinctual, but emotional, deepening with every shared glance, every touch of presence, every heartbeat. He reached out, just slightly, fingers brushing against mine. The contact was electric, sending shivers down my spine, yet it was gentle, careful, a test as much as an invitation. I did not pull away. Instead, I let my hand remain, allowing the warmth, the connection, the undeniable intimacy to flow between us. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked quietly, voice barely more than a whisper. "This bond, it changes everything. We cannot ignore it. Not now. Not ever." I nodded, heart racing. "I understand," I replied softly. "And I will not run. I will face it with you, no matter what comes." He studied me, amber eyes searching, measuring, yet there was a subtle shift in his expression, a recognition, a surrender, a quiet acceptance that he had not allowed himself to feel in a long time. The forest around us seemed to lean in, holding its breath, as if acknowledging the turning point we had reached, the moment when survival alone was no longer the measure of our connection. The night descended fully, stars shimmering above, and I realized that we had crossed an invisible threshold. Danger had forced us together, instinct had pulled us close, and now, in the stillness of the forest, the bond between us had solidified into something undeniable, irreversible, and beautiful. The alpha's presence, once overwhelming and unyielding, was now a comfort, a tether, a shared heartbeat. And I, the Omega who had entered his world by chance and survived by instinct, now understood that our connection was no longer just survival. It was trust, understanding, and a bond that neither of us could, or would, deny. As we sat in silence, the sound of the waterfall and the whispering wind filling the space between us, I realized that the turning point had come. The alpha who had hated love had begun to allow it into his life, cautiously, tentatively, yet unmistakably. And I, the Omega bound to him by instinct, presence, and trust, felt the depth of our connection more profoundly than ever before. The forest held its breath with us, the night wrapping around our shared space, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty: nothing would ever be the same. We had crossed a line, faced danger together, and emerged not just alive, but bound in a way that would shape every choice, every moment, every heartbeat from this point forward. And in that shared silence, I realized that survival was no longer the goal. The alpha and I were connected by something far deeper, by instinct, by emotion, by trust, and by the undeniable pull of a bond that neither of us could escape. The turning point had come. And nothing would ever be the same again. The night had settled over the forest like a soft, protective blanket, leaving the world cloaked in silver and shadow. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, scattering across the forest floor in fractured patterns that danced like ghosts. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, but beneath it all, there was a tension, an invisible thread that connected the alpha and me, taut with unspoken words and feelings that neither of us could yet articulate. We had paused by a small clearing, the gentle trickle of a stream nearby the only sound apart from the occasional rustle of leaves. He sat on a moss-covered rock, his posture rigid as always, amber eyes scanning the perimeter, alert to threats both real and imagined. I knelt a few feet away, careful not to invade the space he had carved, yet drawn irresistibly toward him. The bond we had forged over days of survival, danger, and instinctive pull was palpable now, more tangible than ever, and it hung between us like an unspoken promise. I took a deep breath, the cool night air filling my lungs, and dared to speak. "You've changed," I whispered, voice barely more than the rustle of leaves. "Since I've been with you. I feel it. You're softer. less distant. His gaze flickered to me, sharp, assessing, and for a moment, I feared I had overstepped. But then I saw it, the faintest shift in his expression, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. Vulnerability. The alpha, who had always been an unyielding wall of strength and dominance, allowed himself a momentary crack, just enough for me to glimpse the depth beneath. "I am," he began, voice low, hesitant, as though he were testing the sound of the words before letting them fall. "Not used to trust. Not used to connection. And yet, you are here. You do not run. You do not fear me. That is new." I moved a fraction closer, careful, yet deliberate. "I do not fear you," I said softly. I trust you. And I think you trust me too. Otherwise, you wouldn't let me stay this close." He remained silent, amber eyes fixed on mine, and I could feel the weight of his restraint, the TLE between instinct and emotion playing out in subtle flickers across his features. The tension was nearly unbearable, a current of energy that drew me in, made me tremble, made my omega instincts hum with anticipation. Finally, he spoke again, voice rough and low. "You are unlike anyone I have encountered. Your scent, your presence, it is relentless. It does not let me forget. It does not allow me to retreat. And that terrifies me." My chest tightened, a mixture of awe and longing flooding through me. "Then don't retreat," I whispered. "Don't pull away. Let me stay. Let me help. Let me be here with you." The alpha's gaze softened, the rigid control in his posture easing ever so slightly. For a moment, I thought he might reach out, close the distance, but instead he remained still, as if weighing every impulse, every instinct. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath, the moonlight catching on the faint tremor in his hands, the subtle shift in his shoulders, the unspoken acknowledgement that this was as much a turning point for him as it was for me. "You do not understand what it means to be near me," he said quietly, almost to himself. "My past, my mistakes, the people I have lost, the bonds I have destroyed, it all follows me. To be near me is to risk pain, loss, and suffering." "I cannot stop," I interrupted gently, placing a hand on the ground between us, palm up, an invitation not just of touch, but of trust. "I am here. I know the risks. And I choose to be here anyway. You do not have to face everything alone. Not anymore." His eyes searched mine, intense, amber flames flickering with something unspoken, fear, desire, trust, hesitation. I could feel the battle within him, the struggle between the alpha who had built walls from betrayal and the man who had begun to allow connection, intimacy, and perhaps, love. Slowly, deliberately, he moved, closing the distance in small, measured steps. My heart raced, omega instincts surging, body alert, yet welcoming. When he finally stopped just inches from me, the air between us thick with tension and unspoken words, I dared to look up, into the depths of his amber eyes. He began, voice low, rough with emotion he rarely allowed himself to express. "I am not good at this. At feeling. At letting someone in. But you are different. You do not run. You do not fear me. And for the first time, I want you here. Truly, fully, with me." My chest swelled with a mixture of relief and anticipation. "Then I am here," I said softly. "I am yours, if you will let me be." His gaze softened further, the tension in his muscles easing, the fire in his eyes tempered by something tender and rare. For the first time, I saw him not just as the alpha, the predator, the protector, but as the man beneath, Scar. Vulnerable, and capable of feeling more than he had allowed himself to admit. Slowly, he lowered himself to sit beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, the strength coiled beneath his skin, the scent that had drawn me to him from the beginning. My omega instincts hummed, alert yet soothed, attuned to his presence, to the rhythm of his heartbeat, to the subtle shifts in his energy. "You smell intoxicating," he murmured almost under his breath, amber eyes fixed on mine. "Not just because you are omega, but because you are you. And I cannot resist you." I felt a shiver run through me, a mixture of awe, longing, and a deep, instinctual recognition that this bond was far beyond mere survival. It was emotional, primal, and undeniable. I reached out, hand brushing against his, tentative yet deliberate, and he did not pull away. The contact sparked something electric, a current that passed between us, binding us together in ways that words could not capture. His hand was larger, stronger, yet gentle as it covered mine, a silent acknowledgement, a promise, a confession all at once. I did not expect this, he admitted quietly, voice low and vulnerable. To feel connection, to feel desire, to care, and yet, here you are, and I do not know how to fight it. I do not want to fight it. You don't have to, I whispered. Not with me. You never have to fight it. I am here. We can face it together. The forest seemed to hum around us, the moonlight casting silver patterns on the ground, the sound of the stream a gentle rhythm accompanying the heartbeat of the Alpha and the Omega. The air was thick with unspoken promises, with trust, with the first stirrings of something more than instinct or survival. A bond that could withstand fear, danger, and even the ghosts of the past. He leaned closer, a careful, measured movement, amber eyes locked on mine, breath mingling with mine. You are relentless, he murmured, a faint growl vibrating through him. And yet, I cannot resist you. I met his gaze without hesitation, hand resting lightly against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my fingers. Then don't resist, I whispered. Let me in, let me stay, let me be yours. For the first time, he allowed himself to close the distance, the tension between us dissolving into something tender, intimate, and powerful. The Alpha who had once hated love, who had feared connection and vulnerability, now allowed himself to feel, to trust, to embrace the bond that had been growing between us. The moonlight bathed us in silver, the forest silent witnesses to our confessions, our surrender, our shared heartbeat. And in that moment, I understood that our journey had reached a pivotal point, not just survival, not just instinct. But something far deeper, far more enduring. A bond forged in danger, tested by fear, and strengthened by trust and acceptance. The Alpha and I sat together in the moonlight, bound by instinct, emotion, and choice. And I knew, with a certainty that reached deep into my bones, that nothing, no danger, no fear, no past wounds, could undo what had begun here tonight. We had crossed a threshold. And there, in the silver glow of the moon, the Alpha and the Omega became more than survival partners. We became something unbreakable, undeniable, and eternal. To every tree, every rock, and the path ahead was uncertain, winding through twisted roots and brambles that seemed almost alive in their menace. The air smelled of damp earth and moss, mingled with the faint metallic tang of danger that set my Omega instincts on edge. The Alpha led with unwavering vigilance, every step deliberate, every sense alert. Yet there was a tension now that had grown since our moonlit confessions, a subtle restlessness in his stance, a flicker of unease in his amber eyes. I followed closely, trusting his instincts as I had learned to do, yet acutely aware that the wild was no longer just a backdrop for our survival. It was a force testing us, shaping the bond that had grown between us. Hours passed in near silence, the only sounds the occasional snap of a branch underfoot, the distant call of a bird, the whispering of leaves stirred by an unseen wind. Every so often, the Alpha would pause, scanning the shadows, nostrils flaring as he caught scents invisible to me. I had learned to read him in these moments, to anticipate danger, to understand his warnings, to feel the pull of instinct he projected into the air around us. Something's wrong, he murmured suddenly, low and rough, amber eyes narrowing as he scanned the dense forest. Stay close. I nodded, heart pounding, and moved nearer, instinctively aligning my steps with his. My Omega senses flared, detecting the subtle shift in the forest, the faint rustle of movement, the way the shadows seemed to gather, the almost imperceptible change in the air. Danger was near, and it was close. A low growl echoed through the trees, and my chest tightened. The Alpha tensed beside me, muscles coiled, eyes blazing. From the darkness, a pack of predators emerged, larger and more feral than any we had faced before. Their eyes glowed with hunger, and their movements were precise, coordinated, lethal. My Omega instincts screamed fear, yet I found myself anchored by the Alpha's presence, drawn to the tether that had become our unspoken bond. Stay behind me, he commanded, voice low and deadly. Do not make a sound. The forest seemed to close in around us, the predators circling, testing, waiting. I could feel the tension radiating from the Alpha, raw, controlled power that pulsed beneath his skin, a force that was both terrifying and magnetic. Every instinct in me screamed to flee, yet I remained, rooted by trust, by connection, by the invisible thread that bound us together. The first predator lunged. The alpha moved with a speed that blurred the line between human and beast, intercepting it mid-leap with a growl that resonated through the clearing. The struggle was brutal and raw, a symphony of strength, instinct, and survival. I felt my pulse race, omega instincts surging as I watched him, as awe, fear, and desire intertwined into a single, overwhelming sensation. One by one, the predators attacked. The alpha met each one with precision, strength, and an unyielding will, yet even he was pushed to the edge. I realized then that our survival depended not just on his power, but on our bond, the trust, the instinctual connection, the unspoken understanding that we were stronger together. I moved closer, careful, tentative, sensing the right moment. "I can help," I whispered, my voice barely carrying over the sounds of the fight. "Tell me what to do." Amber eyes flicked toward me, sharp, assessing, and for a moment, I thought he would push me away. Instead, he gave a brief nod, a recognition that I had earned his trust in ways the forest itself could not contest. "Stay close," he growled, and I did, letting instinct guide me, letting my presence augment his, letting our bond become a weapon as much as a shield. Together, we fought, a rhythm forming between us that was more than coordination. It was a merging of instincts, of intent, of trust. My omega senses heightened his awareness, his strength amplified mine. Each predator that lunged, each strike that connected, each move that saved us from deadly teeth and claws, reinforced the bond that had grown between us, turning fear into power, chaos into unity. Hours, or perhaps minutes, time had lost all meaning in the blur of survival, passed in this relentless dance. When the last predator was finally driven back into the shadows, silence fell over the forest, heavy and electric. We stood amidst the wreckage of struggle, chest heaving, bodies bruised and battered, yet unbroken. The alpha turned to me, amber eyes blazing yet softened by relief and unspoken emotion. "You survived," he said, voice low, but carrying the weight of pride and something deeper, something I could not name but felt in every pulse of my body. "You did not falter. You helped." I swallowed, heart racing, and let a tentative smile break through the exhaustion. "I survived because of you," I murmured. "Because of us. Because of this." He studied me, amber eyes lingering, searching, measuring. Slowly, he reached out, fingers brushing against mine, the gesture gentle yet commanding. A silent acknowledgement of our shared triumph and the bond that had been tested in fire. "You were relentless," he said quietly, a low growl vibrating through him. "And yet, I cannot resist you. Not now. Not ever." The forest seemed to exhale around us, the shadows shifting, the night alive with the quiet aftermath of our struggle. I felt a surge of gratitude, of longing, of something deeper, love, perhaps, though the word felt too small for what surged between us. We moved together to a small clearing by a stream, where the moonlight painted silver patterns on the water. The alpha allowed himself to sit, and for the first time, he invited me to be near him, to lean against him, to share the quiet victory of survival. My omega instincts hummed, attuned to the warmth of his body, the rhythm of his heartbeat, the subtle shifts in his energy that spoke of trust, protection, and the beginnings of something far deeper than instinct alone. "Tonight," he murmured, amber eyes on mine, "you proved yourself. Not just in strength, not just in survival, but in connection. In trust. In courage. You belong with me." I felt my chest swell, a mixture of pride and longing, and I whispered, "I belong with you. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Always." For a long moment, we remained like that, the forest around us silent witness to the bond that had been tested and forged in fire, the alpha and the omega intertwined not just by instinct, but by trust, understanding, and something far more enduring. The night deepened, shadows folding around us, and I realized that this was more than survival. It was proof that our bond could withstand danger, fear, and the chaos of the wild. That no matter what the forest, the predators, or the past might throw at us, we were stronger together. And in that shared silence, I understood that challenges would continue to come, that danger was never truly gone, but that the bond between us, the tether of trust, instinct, and growing love, was unbreakable. The Alpha and I sat together in the moonlight, bodies close but not yet touching fully, hearts connected, breaths aligned. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the wild had tested us, and we had emerged not just alive, but inseparable. Our journey was far from over. The forest, the predators, the dangers of the world beyond waited for no one. But as long as we faced it together, bonded by trust, courage, and something deeper than either of us could yet name, there was nothing we could not overcome. The challenges of the wild had come, and we had not just survived them. We had risen stronger, closer, and more connected than ever before. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the dense canopy, painting the forest in delicate hues of gold and silver. Mist curled lazily along the forest floor, clinging to roots and rocks, giving the world an ethereal, almost magical quality. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the forest seemed still, not tense, not threatening, but peaceful, as though it, too, was aware that the journey we had endured was nearing its end. The Alpha stood at the edge of a clearing, amber eyes scanning the horizon with that familiar intensity, yet there was something different now. The rigid tension that had once defined him had softened, replaced by a quiet confidence that came not from domination, but from understanding, from trust, from a bond that had been forged through danger, struggle, and shared vulnerability. His gaze fell upon me, and in that moment, I saw the Alpha and the man, two halves of a whole, tempered by the trials we had faced together. I approached, careful yet eager, feeling the pull of our connection as a physical force. Each step seemed to echo with the rhythm of our hearts, synchronized in ways neither of us had expected but both had come to rely on. The scent of him wrapped around me like a living shield, familiar and intoxicating, grounding me in a way no other presence ever could. "You are awake," he said quietly, voice low, yet carrying warmth and a rare softness that made my chest ache. "And the forest is calm." At last. I nodded, stepping closer until I was beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "It's beautiful," I whispered, gazing at the golden mist swirling among the trees. "But not as beautiful as this. Us. What we've found together." He studied me, amber eyes searching mine as though weighing every word, every intention. And yet, there was no tension, no barrier, no hesitation, only the undeniable acknowledgement of what we had built, the bond that had grown through danger, through trust, through shared moments of vulnerability and triumph. "You have changed me," he admitted softly, a faint growl vibrating through his chest. "Not just in ways the forest can see, but inside. You've shown me something I thought I had lost. Or perhaps, something I never allowed myself to feel." My heart swelled, omega instincts stirring with a warmth that was both comforting and exhilarating. "And you've changed me," I whispered. "Made me stronger, braver, more alive than I've ever been. I wouldn't trade a single moment, not even the fear, not even the danger. Because it brought me to you." For the first time, he reached out, hand brushing against mine, fingers intertwining with deliberate care. The contact sent a shiver through me, yet it was more than physical. It was a silent declaration, a promise, a confirmation of everything we had endured and everything we had come to mean to each other. "You are mine," he said, voice low, deep, carrying a weight of possessiveness tempered by affection. "And I am yours. Now and always." I smiled, a mixture of relief, joy, and longing, and pressed my hand into his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my fingers. "Always," I echoed softly. "Forever." The forest seemed to exhale around us, the golden mist curling and dissipating as sunlight broke through the canopy, bathing the clearing in warmth. Birds began to stir, their songs a gentle chorus that celebrated not just the dawn, but the bond that had been forged in the wild, tested by danger, and solidified through trust and love. We moved together through the clearing, steps light, instinctive, in harmony with one another. Every glance, every touch, every silent communication spoke of a connection that had transcended survival, transcended instinct, and grown into something far deeper, something eternal. As we reached the edge of the forest, the world beyond seemed almost alien in its calm, its stability, its promise of life beyond constant threat. And yet, I knew that no matter where we went, no matter what challenges awaited, the bond between us would remain unbroken. The Alpha and the Omega, united not just by fate, but by choice, trust, and the unwavering acknowledgement of each other's worth. He paused, amber eyes meeting mine, and I felt the raw intensity of his presence, tempered now by affection, understanding, and love. The forest has tested us, he said softly. The wild has tried to break us. And yet, here we are, together, stronger than ever. I nodded, leaning into him, feeling the warmth of his body, the security of his strength, and the undeniable pull of our bond. Stronger, I echoed. And nothing can change that. Not the past, not fear, not the world. We are together. For a long moment we simply stood there, wrapped in the quiet majesty of the forest, letting the sunlight and the gentle breeze affirm the truth of our connection. And then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine, breath mingling with mine, amber eyes softening into a gaze that was equal parts possessive, protective, and tender. I never thought I could feel like this, he murmured, voice low and rough with emotion. Never thought I could trust, love, surrender. But with you, I can. With you, I am home. Tears pricked my eyes, a mixture of joy, relief, and the overwhelming certainty that we had reached the culmination of a journey that had begun in fear and instinct, had been tested by danger, and had grown into a bond unbreakable and eternal. And with you, I whispered, I am safe. I am whole. I am alive. He smiled then, a rare, unguarded expression, amber eyes shining with emotion, and I felt a surge of warmth, of belonging, of something prim. Owl and beautiful that words could scarcely contain. The Alpha and the Omega, bound by fate, choice, and love, had emerged from the wild not just alive, but triumphant, their hearts and souls intertwined in ways that would endure for all time. We spent the day in the clearing, sunlight streaming through the trees, sharing moments of quiet intimacy, laughter, and understanding. Each gesture, each touch, each glance reinforced the bond that had grown between us, a bond forged in adversity, strengthened by trust, and solidified through mutual respect and love. As night fell, the forest bathed once again in silver moonlight, we settled together beneath the canopy, bodies close, breaths aligned, hearts beating in tandem. The challenges of the wild, the dangers we had faced, the fear and uncertainty, all of it seemed distant now, replaced by the quiet certainty of our bond, the knowledge that we had not only survived, but had found something far more precious, each other. I never thought this could be my life, he whispered, amber eyes on mine, a faint growl of contentment vibrating through him. But now, I cannot imagine it any other way. Not without you. You will never have to, I replied softly, pressing a gentle kiss to his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breath beneath my lips. I am here, always, forever. The Alpha drew me closer, wrapping me in the warmth of his embrace, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly safe, truly seen, and truly loved. The forest around us was silent witness to our bond, the moonlight shimmering like silver fire on leaves and water, affirming the truth we had discovered together. That love, trust, and connection could conquer fear, danger, and even the walls of a heart long guarded. And so, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon, with the forest as our witness, the Alpha and the Omega embraced the destiny that had been written for them, not one of fear or survival alone, but of love, unity, and an unbreakable bond that would endure for all time. Together, we faced the world, no longer bound by instinct alone, but by choice, by trust, and by a love that had been tested and had emerged stronger than anything the wild could offer. And in that embrace, I knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning of a lifetime shared, a destiny fulfilled, and a love eternal. The forest whispered around us, gentle and approving, as two hearts beat as one, the Alpha and the Omega, united in love, in trust, and in the fulfillment of a destiny neither of us could have imagined, yet both of us had found.